Okay, so the innocence. Are we innocent or not so innocent? This is the question that the movie The Innocents asks, I think. Well, it's a question I'm asking anyway in my little fantasy movie review here. Okay, I picked those as the titles of the previous two, and that was only because it occurred to me, you know, who are the innocents? Are most humans in the movie, and even in a fantasy or in reality, are they innocents or are they not so innocent? In other words, I suppose, like in the movie. And I'm really playing this video by ear, I have to admit. I'm totally making it up as I go along, and it's just coming to me as I go along, whereas I had intended to discuss a few points about it. But as usual, the Matrix sidetracks me. No, I sidetrack myself. That is the difference. The Matrix can sidetrack me, but I can also get sidetracked myself. But it is okay if I get sidetracked myself. That is normal. That's healthy. The Matrix sidetracking you is not normal and not healthy, and that's what happens to most of us, including myself, most of the time. Most of the time, I'm merely sidetracked by the Matrix, as opposed to letting my own real thoughts and my own real way of looking at things sidetrack me. Even though, of course, I'm talking about a Matrix movie. But that also is okay. Well, look, it's the best I can do. It's the best I can do. I don't think that really we should be in a reality where I have to point out reality through a Matrix movie. That is like using something negative in order to show something positive. So it's interesting, but at the same time, I think that is the confusion of our fantasy reality, and the confusion of this movie too. But the confusion is that you can be looking at the stark reality in a movie, but you don't see it as a stark reality, you see it as a fantasy. So therefore, and you would wonder why that. I think I've explained this before, or at least gave an explanation as to why the Matrix both exposes and covers at the same time. And that is an interesting point. Of course, most of the time it exposes and it's really completely covered because, it's a bit like that cognitive dissonance thing, or however you pronounce it, where you see something but really don't see it, or interpret it to your own liking, or interpret it as the Matrix wants you to interpret it, or interpret it wrongly. I'm not quite sure if I made sense there. I probably didn't. And I do have the bongo drums going outside as a musical accompaniment today. Usually I have technical accompaniment that is of a more abrasive nature, I would say, in the sense that it's not very musical. Today we have full music accompaniment to my video. You probably can't hear it. I can't say that the music is completely to my taste, but it's free, so I suppose I shouldn't knock it. I could get sidetracked onto music, which no doubt that music is trying to get me to make a comment about music. I think I already have made a comment about music in a video a fair while ago. I'm pretty sure I did. I could be wrong. But everything is of the Matrix. And, in fact, I have liked music most of my life. And most of it, I would say, music of the Matrix, because all music is of the Matrix. There is very little music that is not of the Matrix, I would imagine. And certainly these days that would apply even more. Because even music, everything has to be slowly brought into the human psyche, shall we say. Infiltrate the human slowly, because a lot of stuff is really not conducive to a normal human. And a normal human, if they were hit with the full blast of something, all of a sudden, they would dismiss it and reject it straight away. But because it is a slow process of conditioning, like everything in the Matrix and everything in life and everything in society, you adapt to it, and you actually would probably even eventually like something that you initially might not have liked. A bit like, sometimes when you try a drink, this has happened to me many a time where, and some people with alcohol too, where they first taste alcohol or a particular drink and they don't like it. And then they have what is called an acquired taste. An acquired taste, I think, really, and this only just occurred to me this second. I don't know where all this stuff comes from, to be honest. Acquired taste really is, an acquired taste. It's not your taste. You've acquired it. Where did you acquire it from? In other words, it's something that you've slowly learnt to like, that you initially didn't like. That's interesting. Is that a good or bad? Is that good or bad? That's interesting, isn't it? So many things in this earth are things that we, gradually learn to like or accept. And is that a good thing or a bad thing? A lot of people think it's a good thing. A very small amount of people might say it's not. It's a negative thing, because your immediate, instant reaction to things is probably more correct for you. So there again, I'm not going to generalise, because I do think that, as I've said before, there's always that free choice thing, which is also emphasised a lot. And it is actually a point. I'm reluctant to make any point these days, even in the videos, because whatever point I make will be made by the Matrix, and then that will be used by the Matrix and used in another way. Because every human thought is always going to be more enticing for the Matrix, for humans, for real humans. The Matrix must have enticing human thought, because it doesn't have it itself. It doesn't tend to have but it wants to seduce. The Matrix is a seduction force for a human being. The Matrix collective world, Earth, that we see as reality, is a seductive human parasite. Anyway, that sounded good, and I'm not sure if it made any sense. But I do like to make a few fantasy videos, don't I? And I only do that as a sidetrack these days, because it takes my mind off another reality. But at any rate, I will leave the music alone today, and I will go back onto whether we are innocent or not, based on the movie review of the movie called The Innocents. And I'll just be all over the place, because I don't really I had one or two. See, when I first saw the movie, well, not when I first saw it because I had to see it a few times, and you know, I got certain ideas out of it that the movie openly expresses. But then, also there is the main idea, which was what I keep meaning to bring up, as something that I think is important, but it has to be related to our fantasy reality, or if you take it to the extreme like me, where it becomes real. You know, but I touched on a few little things on the movie in the previous videos, but not much. I would say that I would say that there's a lot of interesting dialogue in it. Like when the little girl first meets the governess, the first question she asks the governess is, "Do you like reptiles?" And of course, the governess is not so sure whether she does or doesn't. And of course, it turns out to be a tiny turtle, so she's like, "Oh, yeah, I think that will be okay," even though even that is not supposed to come into the house in the movie. Either way, that's just a fun point of the movie. Okay, so also I would say that I should correct myself. I don't normally do this because I'm not normally even. I don't. Sometimes I'm aware after I make a video that I yes get the words wrong. Like I think in the last video when I used the word benevolent, I didn't mean benevolent. I actually meant the opposite. I meant the word malevolent. And that's interesting too because I've always known what benevolent means, but many years ago when I watched a movie called The Bad Seed, an old movie called The Bad Seed, and I saw it many times years ago. I haven't seen it since. The little girl in that, was malevolent. And I wondered what the word malevolent meant. But I kind of figured that it must have meant the opposite to benevolent, which it is. And I learned the meaning of that through that movie years and years ago because I had often heard that word and didn't know what it meant. And because, as you can imagine, the movie's called The Bad Seed. It's an interesting movie too. I cannot get hold of it now, but it probably would have been made in I'm guessing the late 50s or early 60s. And that essentially is, I'm not supposed to be talking about this. I'm supposed to be talking about The Innocents. But just before I get on to The Innocents, that also is a movie, really, if you think about it. I don't know whether you could look, the premise of that movie, and it was called The Bad Seed. There was this sweet little girl in it who appeared to be extremely sweet, appeared to be overly polite, overly loving. She had the long blonde hair and the big eyes. Not unlike Lulu in a way, although I do think Lulu was somehow sweeter. I do think so. But that kind of image, shall we say. But she was the whole premise of that movie, and I'm going off track here, I know, was that this little girl, and the reason it's called The Bad Seed, because the little girl had a was negative and I could say she was possessed, but in this movie, unlike The Innocents, where we're talking about possession, in this particular movie there was no indication of possession. In fact, the whole premise of the movie was making the point that you can just be born a bad seed. The premise of this movie, even back then, was the idea that this little girl, because she had been created through negative circumstances with negative people, even though her mother was a very benevolent woman, she was the positive force, but she had mated with negative force, and therefore the child had, for whatever reason, only inherited, you could say, the negative force. The premise of the movie was that she was born the bad seed, because the mother lavished love and attention and affection on her and loved her greatly. In fact, was extremely surprised and devastated at some point when, like in the Innocents, where the ladies all of a sudden has the realization the children are possessed. This lady in this movie also come to the realization there's something wrong with my little girl. There's something wrong with my child. She is a negative being. She's doing things that are, incomprehensible to the woman, to the mother. And she finds it very hard to deal with that. Hard to deal with the realization that her loving little child is not really a loving little child, and that she is really a killer, because she actually does kill two people in the movie, even though she's only a tiny child. And she does it intentionally, because she is, actually you could say she's very psychopathic from the beginning, because she has no remorse or feeling about it. She kills a little boy because she wants the medal that she thinks she should have got for winning some competition or something, and she steals the medal off him and then drowns him. And she feels this is justified because she thinks it's her right. One could say that she was spoilt. Maybe that contributed to the that feeling of what they call entitlement. That's another point too that just come to me, because the mother loved her so much that she almost really spoiled her in a way. But if you look at it, if you actually see the movie, you don't see it that way, because you do just see it as being very loving. But anyway, I've gone off onto another movie. But that's a very interesting movie to have a look at if anyone could find it. Because being made so... I remember when I saw it years and years ago, because I was reasonably young when I first saw it, I was actually surprised by it. I thought, what a strange movie to make. And I was kind of... I've always been very much someone that believes or thinks that, at least thinks, I wouldn't say belief, because you shouldn't have beliefs too much in a matrix, I would say now. But I always thought that most things were environmental. I was never someone that actually thought, oh, look, yeah, you're born a bad or a good seed or something like that. I would have always thought, yeah, that you were totally a product of the environment or the matrix, and this is certainly true. This is 100% true in our reality, whichever way you look at it. Even if you think you're living in a non-matrix type thing, no one is immune from influence or from what's around them. That would be no man is an island, as the old saying goes. No man is an island. You can't be. If you are, that means you'd have to be a hermit and be totally isolated from all human contact and all society contact, and you'd have to just live in a cave and and be in contact with nothing. And there's not many people doing that, but either way, I've gone off track there. I lost my thought. It'd be good if I had some sort of feedback to where someone says, look, you just said this, get back on track, but that unfortunately isn't the case. Okay, so I shall get on to the innocents and the not so innocent. Like in that movie, The Innocents, when I say innocents, are human beings innocent, or are they not so innocent? Some not so innocent? In other words, are they aware? Like, were the children aware of the possession that took place on them? Of course they were aware of it, because the movie clearly shows that they not only were aware of the possession, of allowing the two dead people, the man and woman, of Peter Quint, by the way, I said Gint in the last thing, that was another error, another vocabulary error. I don't know why this is happening to me. I'm normally pretty good at the English language, but in recent times I seem to have deteriorated. I think the Matrix confuses me quite a bit, but also if you're stressed you don't concentrate and you do tend to, if you're in two minds you're not concentrating on your words even, but either way not relevant. And, I'm sure that greater minds than me that listen will be able to figure it out. And if they think it's stupid, well then just dismiss it. You don't even have to figure it out. Okay, so the two children, were seduced by their carers. These two people had sole authority over them in the country estate that they lived in, because they didn't have any parents, and because both these individuals, particularly the man, the Quint, as he's called in the movie, the lady actually says at the start to the governess that's alive, that's now looking after the two children, she actually says accidentally she says to the governess, yes, the master has the devil's own eye. And she doesn't mean the master, because the master is the one that has hired the original governess. She really means Quint, the one that is now dead, that used to be the master of the estate, or at least he was put in authority by the true master or the true guardian, the relative of the two children. Because he didn't actually own the estate or the property. He was not wealthy. He was just given sole authority. He was like given, in charge of the place, the carer, in other words. And the same with Mary Jessel, the one that fell in love with him. She was the guardian, or the governess, as the governess. She was the governess that died before the governess that is the main character in the movie now. I am confusing myself, and no doubt, look, I really think that it would be easier to see the movie and figure it out for yourself. I don't know why I don't just come on and recommend movies and say, hello, have a look at The Innocents. But look, it's still just putting ideas, but I'm getting them muddled up. Sometimes I think using the movies show you all these things, but I'm not expressing them very well. Now, so those two were, so she actually said that, Quint's got the devil's own eye. But then she corrected it and said, look, I mean the master. And the governess is confused, because she's thinking, well, he didn't come across as, that sounded as though you were talking about someone else there, because I didn't get the impression that the true master, the relative that that was the carer that had been reluctantly been left with the two children, she didn't think that he had the devil's own eye. He might have had a bit. He might have been a little bit of a. He said he was a selfish man about town type of thing, which is true. But at any rate, but that's still not the same thing. But either way, yes, because Quint was possessed, as was Mary, and then he possessed Mary Jessel, or allowed her to become like him, to where possession can take place. This is how the movie plays out, because you have to be the same type of character. You have to be a certain type of character, or, in my way of looking at it, if I get possessed, I have to be low frequency. And most human beings are low frequency now, because the whole earth is low frequency. In my way of looking at it. That's how I see the reality anyway. But, many others will see it different. There are a lot of people popping about the place, seeing it very positive and, everything is good. We know everything now, so we can fix everything up. The future looks rosy. We're all high. We're all high spirits. We're all high frequency. We're all high vibration. No. I do not think so. I think this is the Matrix pretending that and playing that out. Certainly some of the demigods might be dancing and in high vibration in their own low frequency way, because these people are not capable of high frequency anyway, because they are the demigods of the Matrix God. And the Matrix is all a low frequency realm, if you want to look at it that way. That is what it is. That's what it's, or has become, depending on how you look at it, because the human beings are still the center engine, if you want to look at it that way. And I don't understand these things fully, as you well know. And they're just ideas to some extent. But if you can control the frequency of the human being, then you control the engine, and then you control the vehicle, which is the earth, and you control the whole domain. Because the frequency can only be operated by human beings, because human beings are a living force that is frequency. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm just making this up, by the way, as you can imagine. But if it fits your fantasy and it fits mine, that's okay. Look, I think there's some truth to it anyway. But either way, I've gone off track here. I've got to get back onto the movies somehow. Okay, so so Quint and Mary Jessel became close. Quint, who was possessed, yes, by the devil's own eye, he has the devil's own eye. The housekeeper, Mrs. Gross, who is the housekeeper, not the governess, she knows this. She knows that Quint is a negative person, a negative being. She half realizes that he is possessed by, something else, but she doesn't acknowledge this because she chooses to suffer from cognitive dissonance, because she wants to keep her reality. She doesn't want to allow herself, she won't allow herself to go into that area because she sees it as dangerous. She knows she can't handle it. And so she chooses to ignore things. In fact, she actually says everything is just in your imagination, or, you're fantasizing, you're getting it wrong. It's just nonsense, she keeps saying. Like if someone sees something, she'll say, that's just silly nonsense, And she keeps herself able to live in amongst possessed people by doing this, I would imagine, because she doesn't see them as possessed. And even though she did see that Quint and Mary Jessel were negative, she doesn't see the children as negative. They are possessed too. They have become possessed by these two spirits when they died, because they had already possessed them while they were living, because the children saw them as their mother and father, as I've said. So that was seduction. So they seduced them. The children had a need. You know, we all have needs. We all have wants. And then we get seduced by those needs and wants and desires, shall we say. It happens to all of us. And sometimes we will then be seduced by negative forces, negative people, and they will possess us if they are negative. In other words, you know, they will try to negative, seductive forces try to seduce you into being like them. That is the purpose of possession, is to make you like the one that is trying to possess you. Just as the psychopath tries to take your true identity and your true spirit from you when they have a relationship with you. That is possession. They're performing a kind of magic possession on you, even though it is real, and it is these are real psychiatric conditions, but really they are not. They are really just fancy medical terms, and all of medicine is hocus pocus. All medicine is of the matrix. Medicine seduces you also with a dependency, as opposed to knowing what is your true... I know I'm going off track here, and this is not in the movie. I'm sorry. Physician, heal thyself. Well, humans, heal yourself. But instead we go to the physician to heal thyself when the physician is sick. You know, like a lot of physicians could even be of the matrix. In fact, they probably all are, because everything is of the matrix. Everything is of the earth matrix. And either way, the medicine is of the matrix. You know, it is matrix medicine. Matrix medicine is always never about spiritual healing. Not that I know anything about it, because I'm seriously sick, but I believe in it, even though I don't know how to operate it and don't experience it. But then again, you know, there is a lot of negative matrix, hocus pocus and medicine that does infiltrate certain regions of the world. If you're in a city like me, it's like it's just like being in as I've said before, a virus of technology. And then you go for medicine to counteract the technological virus. The medicine is never going to be able to counteract a technical virus. Never. And a human being that should be able to counter negative forces is really battling to counter massive technical infiltration viruses. You know, it's like a human being cannot, this is just my way of looking at it, okay? A human being all things being equal, can counter, that even the human body can, and I proved this myself in my own life, this is why I do think this, can to a large extent counter quite a lot of negativity and can heal. The body is self-healing. We all know that. You cut yourself, it heals. Depending on how long it takes, depends on how natural the human being is, I would say. And because everything is now technical, the human cannot be natural. So the human can't heal. So that means that we don't have longevity. We have limited span. There's nothing you can do about it. Not unless you're able to raise to very high frequency. And even then you'll have to go pretty high, I would think, in this reality, because, like I say, it's not like you just countering a few things. In the past, that's if I know any history, which I don't know very much and don't tend to understand or actually know if it's accurate or not. But, now, and that's why I say we're in the closure of things, because I would say that it is overwhelming. It doesn't appear to be. Like some people would probably, I've gone off the movie, I'm sorry. Some people would probably say, well, she's talking as though we're in the time of, what do they call, the plague or the Black Death or something. We've heard about those sorts of things. And she's saying that, we're all being we all are under threat that way. Well, look, it's not like that. It's not like that at all, because even then you were aware of the threat, but back then they didn't know what the Black Death was. I wonder if they still know. I don't think they still know, really, but that's just me. I would be very skeptical about the whole thing. But yes, of course, the Matrix can use physical things, that are real or appear to be real, to create, death and disease. These things can happen through the Matrix. The Matrix, can use physical things to create other physical negative things. These things have to be allowed to some extent by humans, but largely, as I've said before, the innocents. Humans are often the innocents. In the past, we openly acknowledged that we were innocent, because if you don't know something, if you don't know how a particular illness comes about, if you don't know that some things can be spread or this sort of thing, and you don't understand how things operate, then you are a human innocent. And we were in it. We've always been innocent, and we're still innocent. I'm still innocent. We're still not aware of how everything really works. We don't really know where things are really coming from. We assume we do, and I think there's a saying, I'm just trying to remember it, to assume is to make a fool of you and me. Something like that. Someone else might get it right, but essentially it means that often when you assume, you're probably getting it wrong. I think that's what it means anyway, but I don't know. Look, but either way, yeah, like, this reality is not like where you are, like we are aware. In fact, we are always under the threat from so-called physical diseases, viruses. We talk about this. We have flu shots. We have all sorts of things. They're all viruses, supposedly. There's simple things that we still can't get a hold of or supposedly cure, or and yet we have all this technology around us. We have this vast, advanced technology. To me, I find all these things at odds with one another. And that's why I don't believe too much of the reality. Because I don't understand how you can, how you can clone Dolly the sheep years and years ago, but you still can't cure a common cold and all these other things, these viruses and different things that go around. To me, very little in this reality or in this earth makes sense. But that's just me. How can you be advanced and know so much clearly in some areas and yet then let other things run rampant? I don't quite get that. Or is that just me with a bit of common sense? But either way, I might have to... I'll go back onto the Innocents. I don't know why I go off onto all these fantasy things, Black Deaths and plagues and things, but I've often wondered about that. And it's interesting too that... I don't know whether I think I mentioned this in... See, a lot of these things I probably mentioned in past videos at the beginning, but that was before I had more realisation of what the reality is, or what I think is largely a fantasy reality. I didn't actually have but I still was aware of, yes, I still did think, oh look, like when they had the so-called plague or Black Death as they used to call it, why were some people left completely untouched for it? Like if it swept through an area, some people survived and weren't, it was as though it didn't exist, and others were killed. Most, in fact, more of the majority seem to have been affected by it. Of course, there could be, like I say, the cognitive dissonance kicks in, and you say, well, maybe the reason that more people were killed in that area was because that was a lower, what would you call it, a lower level of society, or a lower level of, I can't think of it, you know what I mean, where you're poorer and you don't have as good environment and you don't have as much access to medicine. But hey, in those days they didn't really have medicine at all anyway, so it's probably not really worth talking about that. So it really, obviously if you're in the slums, as opposed to being in a rich mansion, you probably had better living conditions. But still, there were people that survived. I could be wrong about this, but I assume that there were people that were left unscathed, as they say, in even the poverty areas or the lower areas, and some wealthy people were affected by the plague. So really, clearly, that if that's the case, and I'm not 100% sure if it is, but if it is the case, it really means that some people were immune to it, regardless of status, regardless of conditions, regardless of environment, or whatever you call all the things that affect people. And I'm going to go with that for the sake of my little video, so I don't know if it's true or not, so you'd have to, but could that be a frequency vibration thing? Or something innate in those people that were able to not succumb to something that everyone else as a human being seemed to be succumbing to. But of course, in this matrix now, that's right, in this matrix now, the matrix knows everything about everything. The matrix is very advanced. It has to be. And that fly is very advanced too, the way it keeps lurking around. But in the matrix now, you still have those same human beings that were around back when the plague or the Black Death swept over the earth or over particular regions. I am not familiar with this. I do not have a clue about where and when or whatever. You know, my videos are very, as you know, very, what's the word? I'm not sure what the word is, but they're not meant to be detailed. Although sometimes I will use detail. I do get my information from details.